Shabbat Shalom. Today's Torah portion is Vayelech, referring to Moses, who is going out and about to speak these words to the nation of Israel. This is Deuteronomy 31. The entire Torah portion is just one chapter this week. And it really brings us to the end of Moses' life. We're towards the end of the book of Deuteronomy. And the beginning of the portion actually shows us a very systematic handing over of power of Moses, handing over the reins of leadership to Joshua. First, Moses comes and talks to the nation of Israel, and he tells them, he is now a man, he's an old man, he's 120 years old. He can no longer fill the functions that he has filled until now, and he reminds the people that God has told him he will not be able to cross the Jordan himself. And therefore he tells them that it is Joshua who will lead them, it is Joshua who will take them into the land, and they should rely on God, trust in Joshua who has been appointed by God, and of course he tells them to be strong and to be brave and not to fear. The next step, Moses then calls to Joshua and tells him in front of all the nation of Israel, he tells Joshua, you be strong, you be brave, because you will indeed lead this nation successfully into the land of Israel. He then writes the words of the Torah onto a tablet, and he hands it to the priests, who then put it in the Ark of the Covenant. The next part of this handing over of the leadership is God himself calling Moses and Joshua to him, to the tent of meeting, where he again then tells Moses that Joshua will inherit Moses, and Moses is about to die. And then in his final words at this point, he says something very significant. He says, after you go, and this is in verse 16, after you pass away, Moses, after you go to lie with your fathers, this nation will betray me, he says. This nation will go and worship strange gods. And what does God then say? He says, they will leave me, God says, they will breach the covenant, and then what God says, and I will leave them, and I will hide my face, my countenance from them. And then all these terrible evils and troubles will catch up to them. This concept of God hiding his countenance from the people is a concept that we see following us through Jewish thought from this time, from the time these verses are written to this very day. What does it mean when God says, as a reaction to the children of Israel abandoning God, worshiping idols, or in one way or the other, breaching that covenant with God? What does it mean when God responds is that he will hide his countenance from them? Well, right here in the verse, we've already seen in verse 17, that God says this means that all these bad things, all these troubles are going to catch up with them. Towards the end of this chapter, chapter 31, we have a reference to God continues to tell Moses that he needs to write down this poem, this song, this particular beautiful poem that Moses is going to write down and say it, declare it to the nation. And indeed, the next chapter, chapter 32, begins with this song. And again, in this song, the Song of Moses, the last words that he gives to the people before he passes away, in this song, again, we have God referring to himself as, in response to the evil deeds or the betrayal of the nation of Israel, God says again, he will hide his face from them. What does this mean? Clearly, when God hides his face from his people, they are no longer protected by him in the same way. And that reference to, and then the evil things will catch up with them, will come upon them. What does that mean? And I think there's an understanding here of God's behavior on earth in general and with the people of Israel in particular that is fundamental, I believe, to our understanding of how God punishes sometimes, or how he responds to the actions of human beings. Many people, all of us, I'm sure, have wondered and asked questions when we see bad things happening to people. And we wonder, how is it that God could let that happen? And I think this question becomes even more acute when we discuss something as horrible as the Holocaust, when 6 million Jews were murdered, men, women, children, in the most horrendous way, for no other reason other than they were Jewish. And many people came out of the Holocaust and they railed and ranted against God, and we can understand why. And they were angry at God and they said, how could you do this to me? And then the question becomes, who is it that did those horrible things? Was it God? Or was it those horrible human beings who called themselves Nazis? And the same question can be asked at any time. We have in the Song of Moses, which follows this chapter, also descriptions of enemies that will come and be angry and persecute the people of Israel. Who then is at fault? Is it these nations, or is God actually doing this? And while there's no simple answer to the question, I think one way of understanding this is actually embedded in this understanding of God hiding his countenance from his people. I think God created human beings with tremendous potential to do evil and to do good. And one of the themes that we see throughout the Bible is God telling us we must choose. We must choose life. We must choose whether or not to follow the good or the evil. We must choose whether or not to go after God or to go after the other gods. The choice is ours. What happens then when humanity chooses evil? That is what happened during Nazi Germany, and that is what has happened every time the nations have risen up to persecute the Jewish people or any other group of people. It is the human beings who are being evil. They have chosen bad. What has God done? He has hidden his face. In other words, when God hides his face, what he is essentially doing is allowing the world to carry on without his intervention, without his mercy, if you will. If God has the potential to rule the world in two statuses, a state of mercy or a state of judgment. What exactly is judgment? There's two different ways of seeing this as well. But I think one element of judgment, and this is something that is well founded in Jewish thought, one element of judgment is not that God is meting out punishment as much as God is allowing the natural way of things to take place without his intervention. So yes, there are evil people who will do evil things, and left alone can wreak enormous destruction. If God is going to turn his face away from his people at that time, then yes, those nations will be God's instrument to punish his people. But it will not be through his own sending of the earthquake or the volcano. That is a different kind of meting out of punishment. Here we are talking about God taking away his countenance from us. And the message here, I think, is very profound indeed. We are at God's mercy. Left to our own devices, well, we have the potential to build a perfect world. But unfortunately, we also have the potential to destroy it. And history has shown us that there have always been people who will take that human potential and destroy it. What we need to do is maintain our relationship with God, keep his commandments, honor his covenant, and then we have a prayer that God will, in his infinite mercy, prevent evil from succeeding. Have a wonderful year. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.